Hey, finally, welcome back to the Fight for Our Citizen podcast. We are here in Tucson, Arizona for the Sacred Site Summit. Um, we had a presentation today on sacred sites, and there was like, let's see, maybe 8 or 9 presenters tonight, and I got my cousin here, Batsulwin Brown from California. Thanks for coming in, Eagle.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, so what we did today, Eags, is what I want to do with all these people here in the mining, fighting the lithium mine, uh, copper mine, is that what we dealt with, at Elem. So I wanted to explain what mine tailings does, because that's what they're fighting for here. Wanted to tell them how it contaminates water, and just let them know what we're dealing with at Elem. So that's something that I wanted to come across to these people here.
Yeah, it's really it's really hard to sometimes comprehend the magnitude of what's happened. What's continuing to happen and how things are moving in the world. And one of the messages I continue to hear is the importance of us, the people who live on the land, who have the longest running connection to the land here, that we speak for the land. And one of the things that I have a hard time sometimes with the Western science and them being considered the experts, and we know today that Western science is just starting to barely validate what our people have been saying for thousands and thousands and thousands of years about this land. And one of the most critical parts of the land healing is us, the indigenous people, the original people from that land. We have a big part to play in the healing of the land. And I think sometimes we forget that, and a part of that I think has happened through colonization and what we've gone through as families, the racism and white supremacy and all the things we've had to deal with that we didn't completely understand how it impacted us. But to, recognize that, the land knows who we are, the water knows who we are, the birds know who we are, and all of the things of the land know us. And so it's important that we have a big part and a big say in how the land's taken care of. And it's time for us to, really step forward and take responsibility in how that's going to happen. And so I'm really glad to, have the opportunity to come down here and to, listen to some of the presenters and, have the opportunity to follow what's happening here at Oak Flat, and also knowing, all your family from down here who've become our family, and all of the things that we have in common. And so, there's a lot of areas that need to have discussion. And so I'm glad that this dialogue is happening, and it's going to be, here for people to reference in the future, to build their knowledge base and ideas of how do we do this.
Yeah. And a lot of times, what we do here with my uncle is that, with mining, there is people who are for and people who are against it on the reservation, and it's because of money, so that's another thing that they deal with here. So, as we deal with it at Elem that already happened, I'm glad that, we didn't have to deal with, who was split. We just, at the time, we didn't know what that mining was going to do to the lake, to the people, to the, all that mercury that's in the water today. So that's something that, people here for Oak Flat need to understand. The people who are for it, like, what's going to happen to your area, like what happened to us at Elem, so that's something that I really wanted to get across tonight, because they are fighting to stop mining, and we already had it go through our land.
Yeah, and I think it's really hard to, like I said earlier, to comprehend the impacts of what's happened, how it's happened. Like you were mentioning earlier, how fast it happens, and within 2 or 3 generations, we went from pristine water that you can drink right out of the lake to not being able to eat the fish and swim and even do our ceremonial washing after ceremonies are done. We've had to stop doing that for our own physical health, and I think it definitely like we always talk about our grandparents and our great grandparents, and then just trying to imagine what they would think about the conditions today and what some of their thoughts would be on how do we, come together and do something about what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what we need to deal with because, like, you were saying, like, it happens right away because, right now, I mean, like I was saying, like, my dad and your dad were swimming in the lake, and me and you were swimming in the lake. We swim all the way across the Rattlesnake Island sometimes, and then come back, and today our kids can't do that, and that's the thing that we wanted to let these guys know here, who are fighting, because here in Arizona, you do get people on a reservation who are for it. They get paid. They get trucks and cars, and they work for the mining, and because the jobs are not that great on the reservation, they go for those. And so that's something that we're dealing with here in Arizona. But in California, that since it already happened, what we're trying to keep together is our culture, our people, make sure we're not contaminated, and there's a lot of things that we deal with at Elem, and I'm thankful that you came over to also speak about what's going on in Elem because you live on it right now, and I was there when I was younger, and I have a lot of fond memories of Elem, so but hopefully that we can help heal the people at Elem.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's there's so many dynamics involved, and you're talking about the money that's involved, and for Lake County, the biggest draw to Lake County is ecotourism, and it's the lake, the fishing of
Mm-hmm.
the lake, and we were talking earlier about just what the bass have done, how it's destroyed the natural environment in the water, and
Yeah.
I heard Uncle Nelson one time say he could think of a dozen fish that he's seen disappear in his lifetime, from the introduction of bass into the lake and all of the species that it destroyed, the freshwater clams and the frogs and all the different parts of the lake that kept it in balance, the different um, animals and things that were living in the water that the bass have destroyed. And so when we think about, the county not really doing much to want to clean the lake, as long as people can come and fish and they bring their money into the county and they can leave, they don't get the physical
Yeah.
health impacts. And so as long as they go and come back, they won't say nothing about what's happening to the water. And but for those of us, like you said, who have lived there, who've grown up right next to the water, it can throw a rock from where we live into the water.
Yeah.
It's a daily thing that we see, and it's not only the historic impacts of mining, the mercury, but also the new things that are happening. The one of the newer ones is the cyanobacteria that comes out of the historic impacts of mining, which is now a new threat.
Yeah.
That's also happening, and so we have to really understand. It starts from that mining and the original impacts, and it continues to morph into something else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but just to let everyone know that if you hear any background noise, it's because we're in a hallway and they're having a presentation in another room. So if you hear people clapping or some background music or sound, that's because we're in a hallway. So just want to let everybody know where we're at today. But we have a lot of presenters that are here. We had uh, Bears Ears, Thonop Nation, San Francisco Peaks, a lot of tribes that came, Navajo Uranium, Black Mesa. So a lot of people had to come here to talk about what they're dealing with and something like we were already dealing with. But like I was saying in the presentation, we have our culture still. We have our songs, and that's something that's very important. In that we keep our dancing going, and no matter what they try to do or stop us from doing anything, we're resilient, and we'll still keep going with the dances and songs.
Yeah, and I think that's the most important thing to remind everybody is regardless of what has happened, historically to us, that the spirit inside of us is strong, and that can never be taken from us. And a part of that is the continuing of our ceremonies and songs and dance and all of those things that we do that make us who we are, and it's really important to also acknowledge the ones who came before us that laid that foundation for us to do what we're doing, and sometimes I guess we don't really think about how, one day we're going to be here filling their shoes and doing the same thing they were doing and what they taught us. And so, yeah, like you're saying, it's critical that we continue to teach and to share and to dance and do those things that make us who we are, because, regardless of what happens to the land, even as bad as it can get, us dancing helps the land. Us having ceremony continues to heal the land a little bit, and at a time, and we might not be here for when things get restored back to the natural state, but a part of what we're doing is we're setting that foundation also for it to continue. And so that's important work, and just to be mindful of how big a responsibility that is, and it requires seriousness and dedication and commitment and having fun too at the same time, in a good way. And so I'm really, really thankful for, all of our family that committed their lives to continue in this way, and fortunately, handed it down to us to do the same.
Yeah, and a lot of our elders and had passed away from cancer, and as you're just saying, like what mercury does to your mind and to your body, a lot of that we dealt with, the effects of it. So we dealt with that, and as time passed on, like I said, like my father, who's 71, who's dealing with lung cancer, who's never smoked in his life, is dealing with that. That's something that all our uncles and aunties had dealt with, and so there's a lot of things that go on in that lake with mercury, and we've been there all our lives. So of course, people got contaminated. So, but like I was saying, when those investors came, we were dancing, and today we're dancing. So that's something that I'm very proud of, that we just kept going with it. You know what I mean? We didn't stop.
Yeah, and I think that's the testament to the importance. And I always remember when we used to go around and dance, and before all of the there's so many dance groups now that it's hard to know where each one's coming from. But I remember Graham saying, she'd encourage everybody when we're dancing to get up and dance, get up, you Pomo people, and dance, and she would say, one day that you guys are going to be doing this again, and it's happening, and so I really hope people take the time to listen to the stories and remember that before they came to doing that people were praying that would come back again, that they would have that connection again to songs and dance, and because our people knew that's what took care of us, that's what worked for us, and that's what we needed to keep us in the right place and state of mind, and that good wellness of being physically well and emotionally, spiritually, mentally well. That's what we needed, and so that's a part of, I think, a part of the struggle that we have to understand too, of what's happening to our people is a direct reason why we can't get together and organize and stop some of this from happening in our own backyards. And so I'm really glad that like I say, there's a bigger movement going on, and I'm eager to network and hear back from some of the people I shared my information with.
What other things that, I mean, maybe not here in Arizona, what other things you guys are dealing with out there in Lake County?
Yeah, so there's a lot, and a lot of times there's so much happening that we can't really wrap our minds around what's going on, and we have so many hardships and disparities that are happening that we don't know which ones to address. And so one of the big pushes right now is we're working a lot with people in recovery, and a lot of our young people are talking about the things they struggle with, and how we need to be more diverse with the way we approach younger people when they're dealing with stress, dealing with growing up in the environment they grow up in, growing up around substance abuse and violence, and how that's having an impact, and one of the things that is interesting, recently, probably in early May, I took part in a gathering called the Wellville Gathering, and this is a gathering that got started by some wealthy philanthropists who are putting money to address issues that arose out of the pandemic. And one of the things that happened one of the things that I think happened, why this push was really big, is that non-indigenous kids, white kids, were being impacted by
Yeah.
not having the freedom to do what they want to do. And I think our people understood, our history of having our land forcibly taken, not being able to go and hunt, to go and fish,
Yeah.
to do the things that we normally did. They were getting those things taken away from them.
Hmm.
And they started to have mental health issues. They started to become violent. And one of the things I learned is the suspension rate went up in schools by the traditional students who weren't getting in trouble, the non-native kids. They were getting in trouble at a higher rate. And so
Hmm.
what was understood in this Wellville movement is that there was five counties picked throughout the United States that had the highest disparities in mental health issues going on, and Lake County happened to be one of those five.
Hmm.
And so this Wellville organization came out and looked at what the pandemic did and was doing,
Hmm.
and how was the indigenous community and tribal populations responding to the pandemic. And one of the things that came out of it is they were wanting to know, how did we historically deal with the losses of our freedoms,
Hmm.
and to look at that, to address what was happening to um, the non-native community. And so it was really interesting. I did a little short cultural sensitivity presentation, and one of the organizers said, we spent um, he's over $200 million trying to learn about equity and cultural humility, and we should have started with the indigenous people first.
Oh, I
That's
see.
who we should have talked to first
Yeah.
about how to address all of these things.
Hmm.
And it was really pretty powerful, because we got to say for the first time that there was the history of all of these disparities, the racism that our people dealt with. And so what kind of came out of it was that indigenous people, we have solutions to some of the problems that are going on.
Hmm.
And so one of the things that we talked about specifically in addressing mental health issues in our community is that if we have access to our lands, if our lands are restored back to us, that we can address our mental health disparities in our communities. We can address the suicide and addiction rates. We could
Yeah.
address the low graduation rates. We could address the missing and murdered indigenous women issue. We could address all of those things that are harming us if we
Hmm.
had our access to our land back. And
Yeah.
so it was a really unique discussion, and the first that I know of. I know your dad came out, and he did an opening, and we shared some time there, and it was good to see him there.
Yeah.
And for him to even share about how that our traditional medicine has the ability to help us, and we just need the access to go to those places where we can help ourselves.
Yeah.
And so it really echoed the message that we were trying to communicate as well.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like when we always ask for land back, it's not for us to build on it. It's not for us to, prosper off it. It's just to protect it. If you give it to us, we'll protect it, and we'll get medicine from it. We don't want the land back so we could build homes and apartments. We want the land back so we can hunt, or we can get medicine, like you were saying, or just so no one bothers it. That's why we want land back, or and it's not for any kind of to make money off. And so a lot of times, a lot of non-natives don't understand that what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and it was really good to, have the discussion with some of the local agencies in Lake County, some of the big players in the county when it came to addressing mental health and access to services. And one of the things that we had talked about was the importance of, how do you support indigenous people and tribal communities? How do you be an ally to those communities? And one of the things that we had to remind them of is, yeah, we want to help. We want to help your community as well, but you have to allow us to get well first.
Yeah.
You can't say, here, we're going to give you this land back, but we want what you guys are going to do too. So
Yeah.
you have to give us the opportunity to restore that balance, and for us to get well, so that we can turn around and offer that to everybody else that wants to get well. I go, but you guys, again, when we talk about equity, I go, we don't want to talk about how we got to where we're at. We want to gloss over what happened to us and just say, let's all be equal today, right now.
Yeah.
And that's not the way the power balance is. And so it was a really good opportunity to tell the non-tribal community how they can support and ally with us and allow us to do what we need to do for ourselves first before you come in and want to poach and pick from what we have.
Yeah.
And that's kind of historically been what has gone on, you know. And one of the things that, you know, we really got to share is one of the main people who was representing Lake County. He lived in the mine, and I can't think of his name right off the top of my head, but he was a former sheriff deputy, and he's part Yurok, and one of his parents is Yurok, but he looks just like a regular old white guy, and he kept saying there is no racism here in Lake County. I don't know why you guys keep saying there's racism, and we got the opportunity to say no, that's not the truth, and we got to tell the stories, and one of the things that came out of this conversation that we got to share is that, yeah, all white people are not racist, but the institutions that you work in historically have been.
Yes.
And so
definitely.
you can participate in racism by saying the wrong thing or using your position of power in a negative way, and then you can be called and drawn into that system of racism. I said, so you guys really have to know what that is. I go, and stop trying to quash the discussion, but take the opportunity to learn how we see things and how we hear things. And it was really good. There was a Mexican sister there from one of the local child agencies for the Hispanic community. And she said, you know, one of the things that Mexican people are good at is reading body language. And we know as soon as we come into your building if you want us there or not by the way you look and your body posture. And we know right then and there if you're going to help us or not. And I was like, wow. I said we know that same thing too, you know. I said so it's something universal that we all have understanding of.
Yeah, I mean, you know, living in Lake County, you know, when I was there in high school, yeah, there is racism, you know, and the thing that kept us together was we you know, stayed together, you know, as cousins, and we had the shakehead group, you know, and the shakehead group, I always tell my kids that the shakehead group kind of kept me out of trouble. You know, we had to go to places, we had to dance to places, you know, and that kind of saved me when I was younger. You know, I never realized that until I got older, that's what you know, that what Graham was doing for us was something, you know, for us in the future, and now look at us today, you know, we're dancing in our own groups, but the racism, you know, it happens all over the place, and you know, I have a lot of good, you know, Caucasian friends that are, you know, dear friends, and so it's just hard to, you know, to some of them don't even understand, you know, that they have that too, you know, and then explain to them like, you know, you can get more than I can, you know, like I, you know, then they're like, no, we can't, you know, no, really, seriously, you know, like sometimes they don't see it, you know, and they're dear friends, you know, and so I just kind of like, okay, I won't say anything else, you know.
Yeah, that's the part I think too. It's funny, you know. I seen one of the older Masan families, you know, came over to the res for the services this past week, and it was good to see. I go, man, you know, Al Tubbs. I go, man, Al. I go, even after all of the stuff, I go, you broke up our team, you know, our Sal's Market Little League team, and I said, you know, and you thought you were doing a good thing by getting us to hang out with other people, and I go, but you've always come here. I said, you're not afraid to come here, and you haven't been afraid to speak up for us when you needed to. I said, and I go, so I appreciate that, you know, and there are those ones, people who've kind of grown up in the same situations we have, and you know, kind of have that understanding how, you know, even some of the poor white folks who get mistreated, you know, because they're not wealthy or they're not affluent or come from, you know, families with wealth, that they can get treated just as badly as us, you know, and so it's really good to, you know, when we have people and we can have those discussions, you know, and I was having a discussion with one of my buddies from high school, and he was asking me, he said, hey, why do you keep posting stuff, you know, kind of negative about our country? And I said, well, you have to step in my shoes. I said, and I said, you might be able to see it differently. And I want you to understand, I'm not directly saying this about you. So if you get offended, I go, that's on you. I go, I'm not saying your name. I'm not saying your family. I'm saying this is what historically happened. I go, and I go, you get offended because it's people um, that looked like you that might have
Yeah.
done this. I go, but if you didn't do nothing like that, don't get mad. I go,
Yeah.
because we're just trying to tell our truth. And I go, a part of us healing is acknowledging the truth of what happened to us.
Mm.
And I go, and it's time. I said, things have happened to this country. And I go, now is a important time. I go, even with what happened, with George Floyd, that
Yeah.
gave a lot of ability for us to talk about what has gone on to us,
Mm.
because our people are dying at the same rate,
Yeah.
as our African relatives as well, but we don't make the news all the time in that. We just make the news when we get arrested and
Yeah.
get caught doing something not good.
Yeah.
Then we're in the news.
And that's what I would say about even the George Floyd incident. It helped change a lot of things. Even one of the things that really changed was with the Washington football team.
Yeah.
That came from George Floyd.
Mm-hmm.
Just a lot of things that we were able to finally say after that.
Mm-hmm.
And so things have turned around. But like I say, with the mining, it's so hard to deal with. When the government or when the investors see a lot of money, that's the hardest fight. Is the money. Is something that we fight all the time for. Like they want money, they see the money, and we're trying to stop it. And so that's one thing we would deal with
Yeah.
in this United States is the money.
Yeah, and I'm glad that's nobody has shied away from that here.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the speakers, directly acknowledging what capitalism has done. And I think for a long time people have been too afraid to say that capitalism is the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the things that we have to acknowledge is, if we look globally, the system that dominates the world is capitalism, and it's brutal. It
Mm-hmm.
kills people all over the world. For the wealth, the resources, whether it's copper or gold or platinum or uranium or lithium, it's killing everybody. And I think that's the thing we have to understand. Is the people that are after this. They're a small minority of people, but they have a lot of resources.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we have to really figure out how do we unite, not only in our communities and our families, but globally to address what's happening, because, we're talking about what's happening here in our lands, and it's happening just as bad everywhere else too, and I think raising the awareness and also calling out the attention to what's going on elsewhere, like that's happening here. I've heard about, San Francisco peaks. I've heard about Black Mesa, but I've never been present when actual people spoke who are involved with those struggles, and so it's good to hear that, this gathering is bringing attention to all of these battles.
Mm-hmm. And as I always tell, with the Pomo people, it seemed like because they dealt with early settlers from Russia first, and then and Spain, and then they deal with the settlers. It's I feel like sometimes we got conquered kind of right away because we're a very friendly tribe, a welcoming tribe. We'll welcome like that painting. We'll welcome right into the roundhouse.
Yeah.
And it seemed like we really welcome people in and like, oh, they're gonna be good, and then then we got either got turned into slaves or we were slaughtered.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like the Pomo, even today, we're still like that. We're very welcoming and coming to the house. Oh, go ahead, open a refrigerator. Back in the day, I could just open any refrigerator. It's funny because I tell my kids, if I did that on the St. Carlos reservation, my uncle would be like, "Hey, why are you opening my fridge for?" Because they're real resilient, like strong, they're warriors, and they don't trust, like that's why they, the Apaches, they were the last ones to surrender, because they're really, they fight, and they're warriors, and but I tell my my kids, like the Pomo people, we're friendly, we dance and we live right by the lake, had all this resources. We didn't move anywhere, everything was right there. So, of course the settlers came and they saw that as easy taken, and that's how we lost a lot of our stuff.
Yeah, and I think that's the one of the things we got to take away from that is understanding that our people were highly, and I don't like using the word civilized, but that's the best word that can come to my mind.
Yeah.
And we were highly intelligent, and to the point where we didn't have to war with each other. We didn't have to have those kind of societies because, like you said, everything we needed was there. it was bountiful. It was plenty,
Yeah.
and we knew how to live with the land. We knew how much to gather. We knew exactly what we should be taking and what we should be leaving,
Mm.
and so we were highly intelligent in how we lived, and you get to that place by having that relationship and intelligence to understand this is how I live with this land.
Yeah.
And I think those are the things, like you said, when it came to the settlers coming in, we understood there was more than enough to feed another group of people.
Yeah.
And I remember, Uncle Nelson telling us one time, we were at a language class, and he was sharing a story from his great grandpa, and he said how when the white people came, he said they were all scruffy looking and didn't smell good, and our people felt bad for them, and they fed them and took care of them, and because he said, part of our custom was when you came into our land, we were responsible to take care of you. And
Yeah.
he goes, so we did that and didn't realize that, they weren't the same way we were. They weren't kind like that, and they were violent, but, it took us having to go through that before we understood, like, man, they're taking advantage of us,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
and I think that's the hard part. And like you said, it was still that good-natured people and
Mm-hmm.
welcome people, and we've had friends from all nationalities growing up, and
Yeah.
and I think back at all the the Masan friends that came to the res, and
Yeah.
and then the ones who wouldn't come,
Yeah.
and so you really kind of knew who your friends were,
Mm-hmm.
because they weren't scared to come around, and but I think, yeah, it's like we were definitely a loving and caring people that,
Mm-hmm.
that we did get taken advantage of, and that's something that happened, and I think it's we need to learn from it.
Yeah. Yeah, we definitely do. I mean, like you said, and we have a lot of friends like that come over to Elem, and a lot of good people, and so we're always welcome to everybody. And I always feel like that's how we got taken, right away advantage of, that we were just right there by a lake, right there with all the fish, right there with all that, everything was right there. I mean, it's just because like here in St. Carlos, you had to, you had your winter land, your winter homes. You went to the mountains for the summer, and then the summer we had different area at our village, so we had a lot of certain areas we were at, but shoot, you're not leaving that place.
Yeah.
Everything's right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's funny. Yeah, but well, I want to thank you for coming out, Eeks, and we'll talk more. We got other topics we could talk about on the podcast, but thanks for coming out here and helping me with explaining to the people of Arizona and all the tribes here, what we're dealing with and what we have been dealing with, but I just want to thank you for coming out here and helping me with that.
Yeah, I appreciate the invite, and I was sharing with my partner. She goes, "Oh, you're probably having a good time out there," and I go, "Yeah." I said, "I am." I said, "I forgot some of the crazy stuff we did." I said, growing up until we were talking about it,
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was definitely definitely a good time, and look forward to coming out more and spending more time, and getting together, our families, and dancing some more, and
Yeah.
doing all that good stuff.
All right. Well, we'll get some more people out here. We'll definitely get my uncle out here. We have some more people coming out. We'll be here for a couple more days, and if we get some more people, Eagle will be with me, and we'll talk to other people about what's going on with their fight for mining and things like that. But thank you, and we'll see you guys again.